Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're doing another edition of Gear Set Battle Doom Tower Edition, this time focusing on the gear sets from the Dark Fae rotation. Admittedly, it might seem very clear when we take a look at the 4 different gear sets, but nonetheless, by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which set is best for you to farm in your particular circumstance. So to start, let's walk through each of the 4 gear sets to talk about what they offer and where they come from, starting off with Fortitude, which you can get from Bommel the Dreadhorn. This is a 2-piece set and it gives you 40 resistance and 10% defense. So this is basically an upgrade to the basic resistance set we get from the Ice Golem. Next up is the Untouchable set, which you get from the Scarab King. This is an upgrade 4-piece set to the immunity set, which already offers immunity for 2 turns, i.e. block debuffs, but it gives you the addition of 40 resistance. After that, we have the Guardian set, which you can get from the Celestial Griffin, and this is effectively an ally protection set where the wearer will absorb 10% of all damage dealt to all allied champions. So think of it as the weak version of the ally protection buff, but it also heals the wearer by 10% every turn. And then lastly, we have the Lethal set, which is an upgrade to the Savage set, a 4-piece set where you get the same 25% ignore defense, but you also get the addition of 10% crit rate by completing the set. And you get that, of course, from the Dark Fae herself. So next, let's talk about the pros and cons of choosing any of these particular sets, starting off with the objectively most popular set to farm, which is the Lethal set from, once again, the Dark Fae. Of course, there's not really any con to the Lethal set. It's just an upgrade to Savage sets, and Savage sets are ubiquitous in terms of building nukers for PvE and or PvP to deal maximum damage. However, there is a little bit of competition from Merciless nowadays, but Savage and Lethal is still most people's go-to when you think of the standard damage dealer set. Unfortunately for the other 3 gear sets, they do have to contend with the pedigree of the Lethal set to try and earn their spot above the Lethal set if you wanted to choose those. So the Fortitude set is next. In terms of the pros, they're pretty sparse. It is better than the basic resistance set you get from Ice Golem because you're getting the addition of 10% defense. But in most cases where you'd want to use high resistance, i.e. the arena, you're kind of outclassed by even like 2-piece Stone Skin. You get HP, which is better than defense, again, in the arena context, because as we saw with the Lethal set, Merciless set, Savage set, lots of people are going to be ignoring a lot of defense, and so having more defense is relatively speaking irrelevant compared to having more HP, which is not as ignorable, so to speak, as defense is. It is, however, a 2-piece set, so it could be a nice filler set, but again, you could also argue that 2-piece Stone Skin could be a better filler set, and so you're going to have to fight that battle in terms of rooting for Fortitude. And then last but not least, Resistance is not the strongest tool in terms of the current meta, at least at a very high level. Accuracy is very strong, and ignore resistance, particularly on mythicals, is very strong, and so just building champions with super high resistance is not as meta as it used to be in the past, and so you're not going to get as much of a bang for your buck by indexing into resistance sets in the current meta at a high level when it comes to PvP. After that, we have the Untouchable set, and the pros of the Untouchable set are that, of course, it is better than the basic immunity set. You're getting the resistance on top of it. Typically, if you want someone to have block debuffs for 2 turns at the start of the fight, you are more inclined to build them with resistance as like an immunity cleanser or something like that. Someone with high resistance, Elva on board, a Pythion, Kaj of the Rye, champions like that, who you want to be immune to debuffs and then also have some relatively high resistance and be the cleanser support for your team. Back in the day, this used to be somewhat of a contender, but nowadays it is usurped by 4-piece Stone Skin, which is objectively more powerful in most instances aside from bombs. However, running Untouchable will prevent you from getting bombed, at least for the first 2 turns, unless the block debuffs get stripped off, of course. And then 4-piece Feral also coming into the game fairly recently. 4-piece set that also gives you block debuffs, but is more tuned towards an accuracy style, more of a debuffer thing. So running your, Madame Ceres in Untouchable makes a lot less sense nowadays than running her in Feral, for example. You get the block debuffs, but you're getting more accuracy stats versus getting resistance stats. And last up, we have the good old Guardian set, which is the mini ally protection set. So you're effectively getting some ally protection benefits, meaning that you're going to be taking damage on behalf of other members on the squad, meaning it's great for your tanky champions, your high defense champions, stuff like that. The heal is 10% per turn, so it is stronger than Immortal is in 4 pieces of Immortal. That would be 6% heal. This is a 10%, but it is notably weaker than a regen set, which is also a 4-piece set. So if you want them to be like a solo dungeon carry, then you're going to want to run them in regen, get that maximum heal. But if you want to help mitigate damage for your team and you have someone who can tank the brunt of the damage, then the Guardian set is a good way to go. However, keep in mind that that champion will take a lot of extra damage on behalf of everyone else, so they're a lot more likely to die depending upon how hard your opponent is hitting. So with all these things considered, what is the ranking in terms of the best set to farm from this rotation? I think it's pretty clear that number one is the lethal set. You're going to want this on nukers of all types, and it's going to be the most versatile thing. You can never have enough ignore defense in your quiver when it comes to building your nukers of various types, attack based, defense based, and or HP based. After that, I would have to give it to the Guardian set. I do think the Guardian set has more utility. It's good when you're first starting out in the game and you're trying to work on your first Demon Lord clan boss teams. Helps you spread the damage across all the champions, so you don't have one champion who's super squishy kind of taking a lot of damage. But also later on, you can put it on someone who's just really, really tanky, who can help take damage for your team. And then third, I would put the Untouchable set. I'm probably more of a fan of the Untouchable set than most people, but I do like the fact that you are immune to all debuffs, not just most of them, meaning that you're also immune to bombs, because you can run Stone Skin, but if you're not running Polymorph or you don't have enough resistance, you can easily get bombed, and that is a very, very easy way to counter most of Stone Skin if you have a bomb champion at your disposal. But of course, the big trade-off there is that the Stone Skin set makes you immune to physical damage for 2 turns or 1 turn or whatever. So there are pros and cons to picking both, and unfortunately that puts the Fortitude set in last place. As we talked about, resistance is not the strongest way to build your champions, particularly in PvP, but also in most cases you would be better off just using 2 pieces of Stone Skin to get the same resistance but switch the defense into HP and have a more robust build for either PvP or PvE. Now let me also show you some examples of champions featuring these gear sets, just so you have an idea of how they can be used if you do happen to have some pieces from other rotations that you might have farmed them on, or you decided that you have enough lethal gear to satisfy your needs. So starting off with the Untouchable set, the one that is definitely my favorite build of all is my Mithril Lifebane, who I still rock in Untouchable and Perception. She is built for the arena specifically, and the main thing to take stock of here is that her accuracy is 279 and her resistance is 721, meaning that combined she's somewhere around 1,000 resistance, and she's also in immunity from the Untouchable set, so she is not susceptible to specifically bombs who have increased accuracy. Because a lot of the time when I'm going against Mithril in the arena, yes, she does have a lot of effective resistance given her passive, but in most cases having 600-ish accuracy on my Nishak or my Gaius with increased accuracy is enough to bomb most Mithrils into the ground. But if you have her in Untouchable, you don't have to worry about bombs, but you are of course susceptible to physical damage, which is why in my particular case I opted for, as you can see here, triple reaction to try and mitigate at least that first turn of critical hits. Another example is more of a speed champion, that being my Kaj of the Rai, who's in Untouchable with divine speed. If we take a look at her main stats, the main thing here are the speed at 284 and the resistance at 622. So she's high resistance, but a decent fixation on speed as well, and she's more of an immunity cleanser style. Definitely an old school build. I think a lot more people nowadays would have this equivalent in Stone Skin, as we talked about before, but in my case I do prefer to run Untouchable / I actually don't run any Stone Skin on my account. You can comment down below if you want to know more details about why I've made that decision. And then the last example is if you wanted to go really, really old school and run a nuker in immunity set, so they're also immune to bombs or any other types of CC. And for now, the only example I have is my Rhonda here, who's an Untouchable as well. And the thought here was to take advantage of her passive here, where she's immune to turn meter effects, meaning that an Armand's in this case would not be able to reduce her turn meter, and then the Untouchable set would prevent her from being stunned. But haven't actually made use of that particular strategy. But nonetheless, I don't use Rhonda that much, unfortunately. But she is ready to go if I ever had to use her for that use case. Moving on to the Guardian set, the best example that I have is Kyoko, who's just kind of a defensive tanky unit here in the Guardian set with Perception. And the main thing to take note of here is that we're not focusing on speed as much. We have HP on the gloves, defense on the chest, and then HP on the boots. So she is trying to be the super tank, and the main stats that matter for her are her HP 72,000 and her defense almost 4k. So the main thing that makes her a good tank in her kit is that while she's taking 10% of the damage for everyone else, for the most part, she's under block damage if she gets a turn, and so she's just soaking up damage for free, more or less, on top of her pretty neat passive to spread increased defense across the team. So she can just make your team take less damage and also mitigate it entirely by putting herself under block damage. Another champion I have in Guardian gear is my Valkyrie, who I do use in my Demon Lord Clan Boss team, and she is in Guardian with Resilience, so she's just meant to maximize the amount of defense, to maximize the size of her shield. That is what she's built for in that particular team. And as we talked about earlier, when it comes to Demon Lord Clan Boss, she is on a team with other champions who are much squishier than her, so she's just soaking up some damage on behalf of them, and her defense is so high that she's not taking nearly as much damage as they would be if they were taking the damage that she's soaking up instead. So the main stat for her that matters is the 7,300 defense. And then last up, we have the lethal set. I actually currently do not have anyone in Fortitude. You saw that I basically only have 3 pieces that I've even kept in that gear set, so it is currently unused. In most cases, if I need resistance in someone's build, I'm either using the resistance set from Ice Golem or I'm using 2 pieces of Stone Skin. But lethal is definitely a lot more used, and I have an example of each type of nuker to share with you really quickly. So Harima, notably in lethal and Killstroke. This is a defensive based nuker, so if we take a look at her stats, 6,800 on the defense. This is one of my most used nukers, so you can see that she's fully awakened and all that stuff. Has a lot of stats here. But yeah, that's the main thing. She has a lot of defense, full crit rate, and a lot of crit damage. She's a nuker. She's built in Savage. My HP based best champion in lethal would be my White King Narses. Same thing. He's in lethal. 1 piece of Stone Skin is nice for the extra HP, but that's not really imperative. And again, for him, total stats here are over 100,000 on the HP. Full crit rate, once again, 331 on the crit damage. And then for the attack based nuker, in this case lethal, I will show you my Fanax, who is also heavily awakened, heavily empowered, but he is an epic, so it's a little bit different. But once again, in the lethal set, obviously I do have champions in Savage as well, but so I'm not going to show you all the champions that I have for arena and stuff, but this is just an idea of the ones that happen to be in lethal. So for him, main stat here is the 6,300 on the attack, full crit rate, once again 296 on the crit damage. So there you have it. That's going to do it for the gear set battle for the Dark Fae rotation of the Doom Tower. Did you guess that lethal would be number 1? I suspect that would be the case, but how do you guys feel about the other 3? Do you agree with my ranking of Guardian, then Untouchable, then Fortitude, after the king that is lethal? If you didn't already know, I do have a playlist on my channel called the Raid Starter Pack, where I did go over all of the bosses in this rotation of the Doom Tower. So if you're struggling with any one of those in particular, the Celestial Griffin, Dark Fae, the Scarab King, or Baumel the Dreadhorn, then feel free to check out that playlist. I'll link it in the description box down below if you want to go see a guide specifically on those Doom Tower bosses. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying the content overall on the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.